The rain was falling in a soft, steady rhythm, soaking the Portland sky in a graze.
Jessica Moore stood at the entrance of Riverdale Memorial Chapel, holding her daughter Emily's hand tightly. Emily, now 16, looked up at her mother with questioning eyes. "Are you sure you're okay to go in, Mom?" Jessica nodded, her voice soft. "It's just an old friend's funeral."
It won't take long.
But she was lying. Not about the funeral. Her college roommate, Rachel Ellison, had indeed passed away unexpectedly. But Jessica had felt uneasy ever since she received the invitation. The handwriting on the envelope. The formality of the wording. The mention of the funeral director's name.
Ethan Reeves.
The name meant nothing to most people. But the moment Jessica read it, something inside her froze. Because 10 years ago, her husband, Daniel Carter, had disappeared during a business trip to Colorado. A week later, authorities found his backpack near a ravine and his blood on the rocks below. No body. Just an empty tent, a shredded sleeping bag, and a death certificate filed after months of hopeless searching. She had buried his memory, forced herself to move on, to raise Emily alone. But now, her heart thudded in a way she couldn't ignore. Inside the chapel, soft organ music played. Mourners in black moved in hushed tones.
Jessica scanned the room.
Her eyes landed on a tall man near the altar, adjusting a microphone and speaking gently to the family. Her knees gave way.
Emily Cocteau.
"Mom." "I'm fine," Jessica whispered, even though her world was spinning. Because the man by the altar, the man coordinating the service, was Daniel. He had the same way of smoothing his tie when nervous. The same posture, the same gentle cadence in his voice. His hair was a bit grayer, his face leaner. But it was him. It was him. Jessica clutched the pew to steady herself. Emily looked at her with wide eyes. "Mom, are you okay?"
"You're pale."
Jessica could barely hear her. Her ears were ringing. When the service ended, people began to approach the man, the funeral director, to offer thanks. He nodded politely, shaking hands, his demeanor calm and professional. Jessica watched, frozen. The name tag on his suit read, Ethan Reeves. No flicker of recognition passed over his face as he shook hands. No pause when he saw her. It was like looking at a ghost who didn't know he was dead. "Let's go," Emily whispered.
"This is freaking me out."
Jessica didn't move. She needed confirmation. She approached slowly, heart pounding, until she stood just a few feet from him. He turned toward her, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for attending. Were you close to the deceased?" His voice. It was Daniel's voice. Jessica blinked rapidly. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask 100 questions at once. But all she could manage was, "I'm sorry. You look very familiar. Have we met before?"
The man hesitated.
For a flicker of a moment, his brow furrowed. "I don't believe so," he said. "I meet a lot of people. I'm Ethan." "Jessica," she replied, her voice shaking. He nodded, extended a hand. She reached out, fingers trembling, and grasped his. His touch was warm.
"Real."
"Well, Jessica," he said kindly, "thank you for being here today." As he turned to assist another guest, Jessica stepped back, numb. Emily caught up to her outside the chapel. What the hell was that? Jessica didn't answer right away. They walked in silence until they reached the car. Once inside, she turned to Emily and said, barely above a whisper, "That was your father." Emily laughed, unsure if it was a joke. "Mom, Dad died when I was 6. Remember?" Jessica nodded. Her voice broke. "I thought so too. But I just saw him, Emily. He's alive." That night, back in the hotel room, Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, staring at an old photo album. A photo of Daniel holding a baby Emily in his arms made her chest ache. She reached into the bottom of her suitcase and pulled out a wooden keychain, hand-carved, with the initials D+J etched into the back. It had been a 3rd anniversary gift. Daniel had made it himself in his little workshop in the garage. It was the last thing he gave her before he vanished. She opened her laptop, Googling Ethan Reeves plus Portland. A few links came up. All were connected to Riverdale Memorial Services, where he'd been working for over 7 years. Prior to that, No digital footprint.
No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no academic record.
It was like he'd been reborn in 2014. She clicked on the About Us page of the funeral home. Ethan's profile stared back at her. Ethan joined our family with a passion for helping others find peace in their hardest moments. He prefers not to dwell on the past and believes in creating calm out of chaos. No references to where he came from.
No personal background.
It was Daniel, she was sure of it. And yet, how could he not know her? How could he forget their life, their daughter? Unless... A thought struck her like lightning.
Amnesia.
She quickly searched for cases of post-traumatic memory loss after accidents. Dozens of articles, case studies, even books appeared. It was possible. People who woke up without names, who wandered until someone helped them rebuild a new life. People who never found their way back. Or never wanted to. She picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. She typed a message to herself. He's alive. But he doesn't know who I am. Or who he is.
Tomorrow, I'm going back.
I have to know the truth. Jessica returned to Riverdale Memorial Chapel the following morning under the pretense of seeking grief counseling services. The receptionist recognized her and kindly directed her upstairs to the small administrative offices. He's in room 4, she said, not needing to explain who he was. You can wait outside, he just finished with a client. Jessica's palms were slick with sweat. She took a deep breath and sat down on the worn faux leather bench outside room 4, heart rattling inside her chest. After a few minutes, the door opened and Ethan Reeves stepped out, holding a file. He looked surprised when he saw her, but polite as ever.
Jessica, wasn't it? From yesterday's service.
Yes, she stood, forcing a smile. I was wondering if we could talk. Privately. He hesitated, but then nodded. Of course.
Come in.
The room was sparse but neat, bookshelves lined with grief literature, a small desk, 2 armchairs, and the faint scent of sandalwood lingering in the air. Jessica sat across from him, gripping her purse. I know this might sound strange, she began, carefully measuring every word, but I believe we knew each other, long ago. Before all of this. Ethan tilted his head slightly, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said gently. I've been told I have one of those familiar faces. This isn't just about resemblance, she said, her voice catching. You're not just someone who looks like him.
You are Daniel Carter. You're my husband. Silence.
Jessica held her breath as the words hung in the room like fog.
Ethan blinked slowly.
He didn't laugh. He didn't deny it. He simply looked at her as if trying to process something incomprehensible. You think I'm your husband? He asked at last, quietly. I know it. I have photographs. Memories. Proof. And I think something happened, something traumatic, 10 years ago during your trip to Colorado. You disappeared, and everyone believed you were dead. But you weren't. Ethan leaned back in his chair. His eyes drifted away from hers. I woke up in Utah 8 years ago. In a small clinic. I had no ID, no wallet, no memory of who I was. They said I might have been homeless, or in an accident. They tried to find records, but there was nothing. The only name I remembered was Ethan. No last name. So I became Ethan Reeves. Jessica listened in silence, her throat tightening. And for the last 8 years, he continued, I've tried to build a life.
I studié funeral service. I started over.
I never imagined I had someone looking for me. She nodded slowly, tears pricking her eyes. I looked. For years. I filed missing persons reports. I searched every trail you hiked. They said you'd fallen into a ravine. They found your blood. He closed his eyes for a moment. I still get flashes sometimes.
Dream. A little girl's log. A porch swing. The smell of cedarwood.
But I never knew if it was memory or fantasy. Jessica reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden keychain, the one with D+J carved on the back. She set it on the table. He picked it up slowly, turning it over in his hands. His fingers trembled. I made this, he said suddenly. His voice cracked. I don't know how I know, but I did.
Yes, Jessica whispered.
For our 3rd anniversary.
You carved it in the garage. You gave it to me the night before your Colorado trip.
Ethan's hands clenched around the keychain. He pressed it to his chest like something sacred. Jessica leaned forward, her voice trembling.
We have a doctor.
Emily.
She's 16 now.
You held her when she was born. You used to sing to her in the mornings. She still hums your tune. He looked up at her, anguish in his eyes.
Why don't you remember?
Because someone took that from you. Maybe not intentionally, maybe the fall, but something erased it. I don't know if it'll all come back. But you're not alone anymore. Ethan stood abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world bathed in a fragile light. Last year, he said, voice low, a man came into the chapel. Mid-40s. Nervous. He asked if I remembered anything about the Unity Health Foundation. I told him I didn't. He left in a hurry.
He found a note under my door the next day. Stay quiet.
It's safer that way.
Jessica's blood ran cold.
That's the name, she whispered.
Unity Health Foundation.
You were working on a project for them when you vanished. I've seen that name in my dreams, he admitted. On papers. On a building's blueprint. Jessica stood up, moving beside him. You were trying to expose them. Something about construction violations, unsafe designs. You were going to blow the whistle. And then, you disappeared. Ethan turned toward her. Why would they let me live? I don't know, she said. But I don't think it was out of mercy. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to stitch together 1,000 broken threads.
You want to remember?
I need to. Jessica reached out, took his hand.
Then come with me.
Let's go back to where it began.
Colorado.
The ravine. The building site. Maybe seeing it will help bring the memories back.
Et hesitated.
Then nodded once. Okay, he said. Let's go find the truth. The air in Colorado was thinner, crisper, as if every breath held 1,000 secrets. Jessica stood beside Ethan at the edge of the trailhead near Silver Pine Pass, looking down at the valley that had once swallowed her world. 10 years ago, this was where Daniel Cotter had vanished. A week-long business trip to assess structural foundations of a new Unity Health Hospital site had ended with a bloodied backpack and a police statement, presumed dead. Now, she was standing there again, beside the man she had once lost. They hiked in silence for the first mile, the trail weaving through pine and aspen, the sound of boots crunching over dry earth the only rhythm between them. Ethan wore a navy windbreaker and carried a small day pack. His hands were clenched and unclenched in an unconscious rhythm. You okay? Jessica asked, watching him pause to look out over a ridge. Something about this place, he murmured.
I don't know.
It's familiar but not. They reached a fork in the trail marked with a worn wooden sign. Jessica paused. This way, she said, pointing to the right. The old construction site was about 2 miles further in. They closed it after the incident. Never finished building. Ethan nodded, but his gait grew slower, more hesitant with each step. They arrived at the ravine just before noon.
The sun was high, casting sharp shadow over the rocky slope.
A rusted metal fence, bent and twisted, barely marked the edge where the accident had supposedly occurred. Jessica stepped forward cautiously. This is where they said you fell. There was blood, torn fabric. They searched the area for weeks.
Ethan said nothing. He stepped to the edge, eyes scanning the slope below, the jagged rock, the gnarled root.
Then he crouched. There, he said, pointing at a broken wooden post embedded in the ground. That's where it happened. Jessica moved beside him.
You remember?
He closed his eyes, gripping the metal fence. I was standing here, arguing. A man, he wore a grey coat.
Heavy set.
He kept telling me to stop digging. To let the engineers handle it. I showed him something, plans.
Structural blueprint.
I told him the materials used in the lower foundation were wrong. Unsafe. There were missing support beams. He paused, eyes squeezed shut. He got angry. He grabbed my arm. Said I was making trouble. Said I was going to ruin everything. Then, he shoved me.
Jessica's briscogged.
I fell, Ethan whispered.
It my head.
Everything went black. He staggered back from the fence, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. Jessica steadied him. You survived that fall. Somehow. And someone found you. Ethan nodded slowly.
I remember waking up in water. Den a face. A man with a lanterne.
He spoke Spanish. I think he pulled me out and brought me to a shelter in Utah.
That is where the memory ends. Jessica exhaled, stunned.
Then you were never meant to be found. They must have assumed you died. Maybe hoped it. I had the documents, Ethan said, voice raw.
Blueprint.
Emails.
Memo. I kept everything on a flash drive, hidden in a small logbox.
But where did I hide it? Jessica pulled out her phone.
Before you left, you gave me a note.
I found it in one of your old coats, buried in a box. It said, if something happens, check the cabin. Ethan frowned. Cabin. Our place in Granby. The one you built with your dad. We used to go there on weekends.
Allons pause.
Then Ethan's eyes widened. The fireplace. Jessica looked at him. There's a loose panel behind the hearth, he said. I used to stash tools there when I was a kid. They left the ravine quickly, adrenaline now replacing fatigue. It took them 3 hours to reach Granby, the small mountain town where their cabin sat nestled among spruce and fir. It had been empty for years, but Jessica still had a key. The door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold air tinged with dust and pine. They entered slowly, the space unchanged, wood-paneled walls, plaid curtains, and a faded photograph of their family still hanging above the mantel. Ethan walked straight to the fireplace, dropped to his knees, and felt along the back wall. Click. He pulled out a narrow wooden box, blackened with soot. Jessica watched as he opened it. Inside, wrapped in a weathered cloth, was a USB drive. Beside it, a folded piece of paper, creased, yellowed, but still legible. He unfolded it. It was a diagram. Markings. Dates. Names. This is what I had, Ethan said, barely above a whisper. This is what I was going to give to the reporter in Denver. Jessica took the paper gently. Then we still can. Ethan looked at her. His face was pale, but resolute. Do you think it's still enough? After all this time? Jessica nodded. The truth doesn't expire. And there are still people who want it. They spent the night in the cabin, not speaking much. Just sitting near the fire, letting the quiet fill in the gaps memory had yet to restore. Emily called to check in, and Ethan, still uncertain, asked to speak to her. They talked for 5 minutes. Mostly silence, a few soft laughs. But it was something. Later, as the fire burned low, Jessica looked over at him. I missed you every day, she said softly. He met her eyes. I think. I missed you too. Even when I didn't know why. Outside, the wind howled faintly through the trees, like a voice returning after years of silence. Tomorrow, they would go to Denver. Tomorrow, they would tell the world. The drive into Denver was quiet, the early morning sun casting long, golden streaks across the windshield. Jessica sat in the passenger seat with the USB in her lap, clutching it like a lifeline. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale, his eyes fixed ahead but miles away. They didn't need to speak. Both of them knew what they were about to do might change everything, not just for them, but for those who had been silenced, ignored, or hurt by the negligence they were preparing to expose. Jessica had reached out to Lauren Chen the night before, a seasoned investigative journalist known for her fearless exposés and refusal to back down from corporate corruption. They had arranged to meet at a small, discreet coffee shop near Union Station. When Ethan and Jessica arrived, Lauren was already there, seated in a corner booth, sipping black coffee and typing on a laptop. Her eyes lifted the moment they walked in.
Lauren stood, extended a hand. Monsieur Carter.
Or should I say?
Ethan Reeves. Ethan managed a small smile.
Both, I guess. They sat down, and Jessica placed the USB on the table between them. This has everything Daniel collected before he disappeared, she said.
Email, blueprint, internal communication.
It documents systemic violations in Unity Health Foundation's hospital construction projects.
Substandard material.
Falsified inspection reports. Bribery.
You name it.
Lauren didn't touch the USB right away. She looked directly at Ethan. And you're ready to go public? Because once this story breaks, they'll come after you again. And this time, they'll come harder. I've been hiding for 10 years without knowing it, Ethan said. It's time to stop running. If I can remember enough to be a threat, then I can remember enough to fight. Lauren nodded, eyes sharp. Then I'll start with a written piece for the Chronicle. But I want more than documents.
You want you on camera. You want you to tell the story yourself.
Ethan hesitated. The idea of facing the world, of revealing not just his name but the forgotten pieces of his life, it was terrifying. Jessica placed her hand on his.
I'll be with you.
He took a breath, then nodded. Let's do it. That evening, Lauren set up a small camera crew in a friend's private office.
Nothing flashy.
Just neutral tones, soft lighting, and Ethan seated in front of a blank backdrop.
The red light blinkton.
Ethan stared at the lens for a long moment before speaking.
My name is Daniel Carter.
I used to be a senior architect working with regional health infrastructure. In 2013, I was contracted by Unity Health Foundation to oversee construction of a hospital complex near Silver Pine Pass, Colorado. He paused, collecting his thoughts. I discovered multiple irregularities. Reinforcement beams that didn't meet safety standards. Concrete that failed moisture testing. Documents that had been signed without proper review. I reported it to my supervisor. Days later, I was invited to the site for a follow-up inspection.
Another pause.
I never returned. I was attacked, shoved down a ravine. I suffered head trauma and memory loss. I was found weeks later in another state, with no ID, no recollection of who I was. I lived as Ethan Reeves for nearly a decade. His voice cracked slightly. I thought I had no past, no family. But I did. A wife. A daughter. People I loved. People who never stopped looking for me. Jessica stood just off camera, her eyes brimming with tears. And now that I know the truth, Ethan continued, I won't let it be buried again. Not by unity. Not by fear. The light went off.
Lauren exhaled slowly.
That was perfect. The article hit the Denver Chronicle's online site 48 hours later, The Man Who Wasn't Gone, Architect's Shocking Return and the Truth About Unity Health. It exploded online. News outlets across the country picked it up. Social media platforms were flooded with hashtags. Former employees of Unity came forward anonymously, confirming various pieces of Ethan's claims. A retired inspector said he'd been paid off to look the other way. A whistleblower nurse provided emails showing hospital ceilings collapsing from faulty designs. But with attention came retaliation. Jessica began receiving anonymous texts, "Stop while you can." Emily's school reported strange men loitering outside. Ethan's phone was hacked. Someone tried to access Lauren's personal files. Unity issued an official statement within days. We categorically deny all allegations. Mr. Carter is suffering from delusions, brought on by prolonged psychological trauma. His so-called evidence is fabricated. Lauren wasn't surprised. She expected the smear campaign. But then, things got worse. One night, as Ethan was locking the door to their temporary rental, a brick shattered the living room window. Attached to it, a message. We didn't finish the job last time.
Don't push your luck.
Jessica rushed to Emily, pulling her away from the shards of glass. The police filed a report, but with no witnesses, no cameras, there was little they could do. It was clear now. Ethan wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting to survive, again. I can't put you and Emily in danger, he told Jessica later that night.
Jessica shook her head.
We didn't come this far to give up. They're scared, Daniel. That means we're doing something right. He looked at her. But what if they come after you? She stepped closer, took his hand. Then we'll face it together. Like we were supposed to. Ethan's voice broke. I don't deserve you. You're wrong, she whispered. You were taken from us. But now you're back. And we're not letting them win. Lauren arranged for the family to be temporarily relocated under protection, assisted by a legal foundation that supported whistleblowers. Ethan was scheduled to testify in a closed federal inquiry the following week. The night before they were set to leave Denver, Ethan stood on the balcony, watching the lights of the city below. Jessica stepped beside him. "You're scared," she said. He nodded. "Of what comes next? Of not remembering everything. Of what they'll do." Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then be scared. But don't stop." For the first time since he'd found his name again, Ethan smiled. "I won't." The courthouse was surrounded by barriers, flashing cameras, and a rising wall of noise. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones reaching over the shoulders of security guards, as Daniel Carter, formerly known as Ethan Reeves, stepped from the unmarked van with Jessica by his side. He wore a dark blazer and jeans. No tie, no attempt to be polished.
Juste honnête.
Human. This was not the public trial. Not yet. It was a preliminary closed hearing before a federal committee on infrastructure fraud, called together in response to the sudden media pressure surrounding Unity Health Foundation. Lauren Chen had helped make it happen. Her article had started a wildfire. Now Daniel was expected to fan the flames with his testimony. Inside the secured building, they passed through metal detectors and heavy doors before being led into a chamber where 5 government officials sat behind a long, dark wood table. A stenographer waited silently, her fingers poised. Daniel sat across from them, palms resting on a folder filled with copies of documents he'd once buried in fear. "Mr. Carter," the lead investigator began, "thank you for being here today. You understand this session is confidential, but your statements are under oath and may be used in future legal proceedings." "Yes," Daniel said, his voice steady.
I understand.
The next hour unfolded like a wound being reopened. Daniel described the structural violations he'd discovered. The internal pushback. The threats. The final meeting near Silver Pine Pass, and the fall. "I don't know who exactly pushed me," he said. "But I know who ordered the cover-up. His name is Warren Trask, Director of Construction Oversight for Unity. He was in charge of the Silver Pine project. He was also on multiple email chains with altered reports." The panel listened carefully. One of the committee members, a woman in a gray suit, leaned forward. "You're saying Mr. Trask deliberately falsified safety reports to cut costs, and when you threatened to go public, he silenced you?" "I'm saying he tried to," Daniel replied, "and would have succeeded if not for my family." Jessica watched from behind the glass. She could feel the tremor beneath his composure, but also the resolve. This was a man stepping back into the skin of his former self, not to reclaim it fully, but to do what he'd been unable to finish. By the end of the session, the panel promised to investigate further. They requested Daniel remain available as a primary witness should a formal indictment be pursued. Back outside, the reporters were even louder than before. Daniel didn't answer any questions. He held Jessica's hand and kept walking. 2 nights later, a new name exploded into the media cycle. Unity whistleblower found dead in suspected suicide. The man's name was Caleb Ross, a former procurement officer with Unity who had spoken anonymously to Lauren about rigged contracts. His body was found in a motel in southern Utah, along with a typed note declaring guilt and remorse.
Lauren calait Jessica in a panique.
"This isn't a suicide," she said. "I talked to him yesterday. He was scared, but ready to come forward. He gave me a list of fake vendors, shell companies used to siphon off government funds." Jessica felt her stomach turn. "You think they killed him?" "I think they made it look like he killed himself," Lauren said. "And if we don't act fast, they'll do it again." The implication was clear.
Daniel might be next.
The family was moved again, this time under federal protection.
A safe house in northern Arizona.
Secluded, dry, and silent. Daniel spent most days reviewing documents, trying to recall names and details buried deep in the folds of his memory. Emily, still shaken by the attack on their Denver rental, stuck close to her mother.
One evening, Daniel found an old melody drifting through the house.
Emily was at the upright piano in the corner, her fingers clumsily pressing the keys to a lullaby he once wrote. He froze in the hallway. It hit him like a wave.
The baby monitor glowing in the dark.
His voice humming as he rocked Emily to sleep. The exact order of the notes. The way Jessica would smile at the doorway. He walked in slowly.
Sat Bézi d'Émilie.
Then, without thinking, began to play. Stronger.
Suré.
Emily stared.
You remember?
He didn't answer. He just played. When the song ended, he looked up. Jessica had been standing behind him the entire time, her hand over her mouth. They were still fighting a war. But in that room, for one moment, they were simply a family again. But the war was far from over. One morning, Jessica opened the door to retrieve a package, something she had not ordered. Inside was a black envelope.
No return address.
She opened it. Inside was a single printed photo. It was Emily, taken from across the street. At her school. On a day they hadn't noticed anything strange.
Beneatit, a andoriten note.
Back off. Or she disappears too. Jessica dropped the envelope. Daniel rushed to her, saw the photo, the message. Something inside him shifted. The fear that had once ruled his life, after the fall, after the blankness, it burned away, replaced by something colder. Sharper. He called Lauren that afternoon. I want to go live. Daniel, they're escalating.
This is dangereux. I don't care.
If they're going to hunt us, they can do it in the open. But I'm not hiding anymore. What do you have in mind?
A presse conférence.
Not just an article.
You want to tell the world everything.
Names. Dates.
Documents.
Caleb deserves that. And so do the people who trusted unity with their lives. Lauren paused, then said, I'll arrange it. 3 days later, a national network confirmed a time slot.
Live. Prime time.
Jessica watched as Daniel rehearsed, pacing the safe house. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't uncertain. He was ready. At sunset, they stood on the porch together. The desert sky was painted in layers of orange and gold. Silence wrapped around them. Jessica turned to him. Are you sure you want to do this? Daniel nodded. This isn't just about unity anymore. It's about not letting them win. Jessica looked at him, the man who had once disappeared from her world, now standing taller than ever. Then let's make them listen.
The lights in the studio were too bright, the air too cold.
Daniel sat in a chair at center stage, his reflection staring back at him from the blackened monitors surrounding the room. Jessica and Emily were seated just off to the side, flanked by a pair of plainclothes federal agents. The air felt brittle, full of unspoken tension. Across from Daniel sat the host, Olivia Barnes, a respected anchor for one of the major national news networks. She was calm but not dispassionate, her posture suggesting both empathy and journalistic rigor. We're live in 30 seconds, the producer announced. Daniel took a deep breath. The paper in his hands, his notes, trembled slightly, but his heart did not. Not anymore. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The camera's red light blinked.
Good evening, Olivia began, her voice measured. Tonight, in a special broadcast, we bring you the story of Daniel Carter, a man who was presumed dead for a decade, only to return with a revelation that could shake the foundation of one of the nation's most trusted healthcare organizations. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Carter, thank you for being here. Daniel nodded. Thank you for having me. Let's start at the beginning, she said. 10 years ago, you disappeared during a work trip in Colorado. Can you tell us what happened? He looked into the camera, no longer needing to read from the page. I was overseeing a construction project for Unity Health Foundation, an organization tasked with building hospitals in underserved regions. I discovered that the materials being used for the structural foundation didn't match the blueprints. It was unsafe.
Dangereux.
I documented everything and prepared to report it to the state. A pause. Before I could, I was lured to a remote inspection site. There I was attacked. Pushed off a ravine. I survived the fall, but suffered severe head trauma and memory loss. For years, I lived under a different name, Ethan Reeves, not knowing who I was, or what had been taken from me. Olivia's eyes remained fixed on him. And now?
Now I remember. Note everything.
But enough. Enough to know that people died because of that negligence. Enough to know that Unity covered it up. Daniel reached into his blazer and pulled out a copy of the whistleblower report, the original pages from his hidden lockbox.
This is the proof.
Technical discrepancies. Altered inspection logs. Internal emails. And more recently, a former procurement officer, Caleb Ross, came forward to corroborate my claims. Days later, he was found dead. He held the document steady, even as the studio fell into a weighted silence. What do you believe happened to him? Olivia asked.
Daniel's voice was clear.
I believe he was murdered. And I believe Unity Health Foundation, or the people who profit from its corruption, are responsible. The camera lingered on Olivia, then back to Daniel. There are thousands of people being treated in Unity-funded clinics and hospitals. Many of those buildings were constructed on unsafe foundations. If we don't speak up now, it's only a matter of time before someone else dies, not just the whistleblowers, but the patients. Jessica watched from the wings, her fingers interlocked with Emily's. Her heart was breaking and swelling at the same time. This was the man she married. This was the man she lost. And now, he had come back to become something more.
The interview lasted 37 minutes.
By the time it ended, Daniel had named 6 Unity executives.
Four frauduleux vendeurs.
And a federal senator whose campaign was partially financed by Unity subsidiaries. The backlash was immediate. That night, the network's website crashed from traffic overload. Within hours, hashtags like #DanielCarterTruth and #UnityCoverUp were trending nationwide. The next day, Unity Health Foundation held a press conference denying all allegations, calling Daniel's appearance a tragic spectacle rooted in mental illness and manufactured conspiracy. But their spokesperson could not explain the documents, or the verified chain of emails Lauren Chun had independently confirmed. In Washington, congressional leaders announced an emergency oversight investigation. And across the country, families who had lost loved ones in collapsing clinics or underfunded rural hospitals began to speak up. But with the attention came new threats. The morning after the broadcast, Daniel received a package.
No return address.
Inside was a single object, a spent bullet casing, and a typed note. This time we won't miss. Jessica opened it with him. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him. What now? We don't back down, he said. He contacted federal authorities. The agents monitoring their case increased protection. Emily was transferred to remote schooling. Lauren Chun published another piece titled The Cost of Truth. But Daniel was already thinking one step ahead. I'm going to the press again, he told Jessica.
Note juste nationale. Internationale.
If they want to bury me, they'll have to bury the entire world's eyes. Jessica nodded, unwavering.
I'll go with you.
That night, Daniel stood in the kitchen of their safe house, looking through a folder Lauren had sent. Among the papers was a list of contractors involved in the original Unity bids, some of whom Daniel hadn't remembered. Until now. His fingers paused over one name.
Gregory Hale.
A subcontractor who had overseen 3 of Unity's largest rural builds, including the one near Silver Pine Pass. And suddenly, it clicked.
Daniel remembered a meeting. A shooting match.
Gregory insisting that materials were within tolerance. That the specs had been signed off by Trask. Daniel had refused to approve the final phase of the design. Gregory had threatened him.
You know where your family lives, Carter.
You're not the only one who can disappear. He dropped the file.
Jessica came running. What is it?
I remember who threatened me. Who pushed me.
Jessica S. briscogged.
We need to tell the feds. Daniel nodded. But deep down, he knew something else. They were closing in.
The memory. The truth.
The names. And someone, maybe many someones, were getting desperate. The fight had just entered its most dangerous phase.
The knock came just after midnight.
Jessica shot up from the couch, heart pounding. Daniel was already at the door, his hand hovering near the knob, eyes trained on the peephole. It was one of the federal agents, Melissa Jameson, dressed in plain clothes but flashing her badge the moment he opened the door. You both need to come with me. Now, she said. There's been a breach. Jessica grabbed Emily's coat while Daniel shut down his laptop, pocketing the USB again. The 3 of them were ushered into a black SUV parked on the dirt road behind the safe house. The other agent, Trevor Lang, was already behind the wheel, face tight. What happened? Daniel asked. Someone tried to access the federal witness database using your credentials, Melissa said, turning to face them in the back seat. Then they wiped them. Not just yours, Everyone tied to your case.
Jessica's blood ran cold.
What does that mean? It means whoever is behind this, they have access.
Deep access.
Daniel stared out the window as pine trees flicked by under moonlight. They're not going to stop, he murmured.
Not until Someone dies.
Melissa didn't argue. By the time they reached the federal field office in Flagstaff, the sky had started to pale with early morning light. Inside, everything was tense, humming with quiet urgency. Screens blinked with red-coded alerts. Phones rang in clipped bursts. Daniel and Jessica were brought to a secure conference room. A whiteboard displayed names, locations, connections. At the center, Unity Health Foundation. A new name had been added in red ink, Gregory Hale.
Daniel stepped closer.
I remember him. He was the one who coordinated the subcontractors on the Silver Pine site. He threatened me the day before I disappeared. Said I was asking too many questions. Melissa nodded. We've had our eye on him since your interview. But last night, our system flagged his IP trying to scrub all digital records of the Silver Pine build. He failed, but the attempt triggered a full-level alert. Trevor entered the room with a thin man in a crisp gray suit behind him. This is Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Rayner, he said. He'll be overseeing the prosecution moving forward. Rayner greeted them with a nod.
Monsieur Carter, Mrs. Moore.
First of all, thank you. You've already done more than most people ever dare. Daniel didn't smile.
It's not over.
Rayner agreed. No, it's not. And that's why I'm asking you to testify in front of a federal grand jury. Not a closed session. This will be the first step in moving toward criminal indictments. Jessica's hand tightened around Daniel's. When? She asked.
3 days.
Back at the new safe house, hidden among the red rocks of Sedona, Daniel found himself staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him was no longer unfamiliar, but it still felt incomplete.
10 years stolen.
10 years he could never reclaim. But maybe, just maybe, he could give those years meaning. That evening, he sat on the porch with Emily. The stars were coming out, pale and shy against the deepening indigo sky. Are you scared? She asked him. Every minute, he admitted. Emily was quiet for a while. Then she said, I remember one dream I used to have when I was little. I was in a boat, lost at sea. I couldn't see land, just waves. But I could hear someone singing. Daniel turned to her. It was a lullaby. And I always thought it was Mom, but it wasn't. It was deeper. Softer. It was you, wasn't it? Daniel swallowed.
I don't know.
But I hope it was. They sat in silence, letting the night wrap around them. The next day, Lauren Chin arrived in person, armed with folders, questions, and a crew. The network wanted to follow up Daniel's interview with a documentary segment, a long-form investigation into Unity's corruption, the loss of oversight, and the dangerous consequences. Daniel agreed, but only under one condition. I want you to air it after the grand jury testimony. Not before. Lauren raised an eyebrow. You think they'll try something? I think they're already trying. She agreed. As her crew set up in the house, Jessica and Daniel stepped outside, walking along the winding dirt path behind the property. You don't have to do this alone, she said quietly. Daniel stopped. I know. But I have to be the one to stand in front of them. Jessica looked at him, her voice firm. Just make sure you walk back out. He nodded, kissed her forehead. I will. That night, Daniel received a call from an unlisted number. He almost didn't answer. But something told him to. Hello.
A man's voice, calm, almost gentle.
You're making this harder than it needs to be, Mr. Carter.
Daniel said nothing. We don't want to hurt you.
We just want this to go away. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to kill me. The voice remained unchanged. We're not the only ones watching. The people who stand to lose from this, they have more power than you realize.
Be careful, Daniel. We don't like loose ends.
The line went dead. Daniel sat for a long time, the phone still in his hand. Then he stood up, walked to his desk, and opened his laptop. He began writing his statement for the grand jury.
Every detail. Every memory.
Every truth. If they wanted to silence him, they'd have to silence the whole damn system. He would speak. And this time, everyone would hear. 3 black SUVs rolled into the underground garage of the federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix, their tinted windows reflecting the bright desert sun. Daniel sat in the back seat of the middle car, his hands folded in his lap, a thin folder resting against his chest. Across from him, Agent Melissa Jameson gave a curt nod.
On suit inside, stay with me.
The jury is under a gag order. You'll be safe. Daniel nodded, but he wasn't thinking about safety anymore. He was thinking about truth. About the voices he'd silenced in his own mind for 10 years, and the ones that had been silenced by others. About Caleb Ross. About the patients who trusted Unity clinics to protect them. About his family, Jessica, Emily, and everything they'd endured just for him to be here. The doors opened. The hallway smelled of paper and recycled air.
Plein waltz. Fluorescent lights.
Daniel walked with measured steps through 2 sets of security doors and into a courtroom built for secrets. The grand jury was already seated, 16 citizens from across Arizona, hand-picked and sworn to confidentiality. They watched him closely as he entered, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. The federal prosecutor, Mark Rayner, greeted Daniel and motioned him to the witness chair.
A clerk raise a hand. Raise your right hand, please.
Daniel stood straight, repeating the oath with a calm voice. When he sat, Rayner began. Please state your name for the record.
Daniel Carter.
You've also gone by another name in recent years. Is that correct? Yes.
Ethan Reeves.
After I suffered traumatic memory loss due to a fall caused by an attack while working on a Unity Health Foundation project in Colorado. The room was silent, save for the quiet tapping of the court stenographer's fingers. Tell us about your role with Unity prior to your disappearance. Daniel unfolded a set of documents. I was a lead structural architect assigned to review and approve the Silver Pine Regional Hospital project. In the course of my review, I discovered discrepancies between the blueprints I signed off on and the materials being delivered on site. Steel beams were substandard. Support pylons were thinner than required. And safety tests were falsified. He passed the documents to Rayner, who held them up.
These are the original blueprints, correct?
Yes.
My signature is on the bottom.
The jurors leaned forward as Rayner walked them through the alterations. Emails.
Internal memo.
A log showing Daniel had scheduled a meeting with a regional inspector 2 days before he vanished. Tell us what happened next.
Daniel recounted the confrontation with Gregory Hale.
The threats. The push.
The fall. Waking up in water.
Being found by a traveler. Weeks in a clinic in Utah. The void where his past should have been. And now? Rayner asked. Now I remember enough to know they tried to kill me. And I believe they've done worse to others. Gasps rippled through the room when Rayner displayed photos of Caleb Ross, then the threatening message sent to Daniel weeks earlier. He showed the bullet casing.
The anonymous note sent to Jessica.
The surveillance photo of Emily outside her school. Why do you think they targeted your family? Daniel's voice trembled, but his gaze didn't shift. Because I didn't die the first time.
And now, I'm talking.
One of the jurors, a middle-aged woman in a denim blouse, raised a hand. Why didn't you come forward sooner, if you knew all of this? Daniel took a breath. Because I didn't know who I was. I lived 10 years in the shell of a man who had no name, no past.
When the memory came back, they came in fragments, like pieces of a broken mirror.
I had to fight to remember my own daughter's face. But I did. And now that I remember, I can't stay silent. Another juror asked, do you think Unity is still cutting corners? I think they've learned how to hide it better, Daniel said. But they've built an empire on fraud. And if no one stops them, they'll do it again. Rayner nodded. No further questions at this time. Daniel stepped down, heart hammering in his chest. As he returned to his seat beside Melissa, he saw some jurors exchanging glances, serious, contemplative. It wasn't over, but something had shifted. The truth was now in their hands. Hours later, back at the safe house, Daniel collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but lighter somehow. Jessica sat beside him, lacing her fingers through his. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." He shook his head. "I did what I had to." Emily entered the room holding her tablet. "Dad, you need to see this." She handed it to him. A breaking news headline from a national outlet read, "Justice Department confirms criminal investigation into Unity Health Foundation." Below it, photos of 4 Unity executives, including Gregory Hale, flashed across the screen. "They're coming for them," Jessica said. "No," Daniel replied, eyes fixed on the screen. "They're finally coming." But victory never came without a price. Later that night, as the family prepared for bed, Melissa received a call on her encrypted line. She listened, her face hardening. "There's been a breach," she told Daniel.
They know where we are.
"How?" Jessica asked. "Unknown. Maybe an insider. Maybe surveillance. We have to move again.
Tonight."
They packed what they could. Emily clutched her backpack and Daniel's old wooden keychain. Jessica loaded the USB into her travel bag. A secondary team of agents was dispatched to reroute the family to a new location. As they pulled out of the driveway under the blanket of night, headlights flared in the rearview mirror.
À Black Sedan.
Unmarked. Pacing them from a distance. Melissa swore, reaching for her radio. "We've got a tail." Trevor, driving, kept his cool.
Hold tight.
The SUV accelerated. The road twisted through desert scrub and canyon edges. The black sedan followed, matching their speed. Melissa rolled down her window and raised her service weapon. "If they get closer." But they didn't. Just before the road curved sharply toward the interstate, the sedan peeled off down a side road, vanishing into the dark. Daniel stared after it, a chill creeping down his spine. "They're watching." Melissa nodded. "Let them watch. We'll make damn sure they know they've already lost." As the SUV continued down the highway, Daniel looked back at the receding lights of Sedona, knowing one truth.
The closer you get to exposing the lie, the louder the silence fight back.
But he wasn't running anymore. He was walking straight through the fire. The safe house in Santa Fe was tucked into the hills, camouflaged by adobe walls and desert brush. From the outside, it looked like any other retreat in the New Mexico countryside. But inside, it was a bunker of tension, fortified with reinforced doors, cameras, and the weight of knowing everything could unravel at any second.
Daniel stood at the kitchen island, sipping black coffee, his eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night.
The grand jury testimony had been submitted for federal review. Subpoenas were being drafted. And the news was moving faster than the authorities could contain. Gregory Hale had disappeared. That was the latest headline. He'd been scheduled to appear before the Office of Professional Responsibility for questioning. Instead, he cleaned out his office, abandoned his condo in Denver, and vanished. No cell activity. No credit cards.
No sign of travel.
Jessica joined Daniel in the kitchen, setting her phone down on the counter. "Lauren says a second whistleblower has come forward."
A project managed in Nebraska.
He confirmed Unity ordered rebar substitutions in a hospital built near a floodplain.
Daniel exhaled slowly.
"That's 3 now. How many more are out there?" "Enough," she replied. "Enough to make it undeniable." Daniel opened his laptop. The files Lauren had secured, metadata from the blueprints, financial links between Unity and various shell contractors, had been backed up in multiple locations. Just in case. But now, he was preparing to take the next step. He was writing a letter to the public. Not another press statement.
Not an interview.
A letter.
Direct.
Unfiltered. From him to the people. Jessica read over his shoulder in silence. "For 10 years, I lived without a name.
Without a past. Without a voice.
What I have learned since regaining my memory is this: silence is profitable. Silence can be bought.
Manufactured.
Enforced. But truth is heavier. Truth returns in fragments. It rises through the cracks, and it demands to be seen." He paused. Jessica put her hand on his.
"C'est the rest with your heart."
Not with fear. He looked at her, then kept typing. "Unity Health Foundation gambled with your safety. And when I tried to stop them, they tried to bury me. Now I'm asking you not to let them bury the truth. This isn't just my story, it's yours. It belongs to every patient, every worker, every family who trusted them. We deserve better. And we can demand it. Together. He hit save. Lauren published the letter later that day. Within hours, it was shared over 2 million times. Thousands of comments poured in. Some from victims. Others from hospital staff. Former Unity employees. Survivors. Widows. And one anonymous message that stood out among the flood. I was at Silver Pine the day you fell. I didn't push you. But I saw who did. You were right.
You Renaud Talon.
Daniel's hands shook as he stared at it. A witness. That night, the safe house's backup generator kicked on without warning.
The lights flickered.
Melissa burst into the room with her service weapon drawn. Stay low. Security grid went offline. Could be a test run, or a breach. Trevor barked into his radio, demanding confirmation from the perimeter teams.
Daniel Puled Emily down behind the kitchen island.
Jessica shielded her daughter's body with her own.
The house was suddenly full of shadow and silence. Then a loud bang from the south side.
Trevor shouted, We've got movement. Melissa moved toward the hallway, gun raised. Her voice low, commanding. Stay down. Don't move.
Another bang. Then silence. The radio crackled. Contact outside.
Hostile fleeing.
Backup en route.
No injuries. Repeat, no injuries.
Daniel slowly stood, at pounding.
Melissa returned, jaw clenched.
Perimte briche.
They didn't get in. But they wanted you to know they were close. Jessica's face was pale. Why now? Why risk everything? Because you're winning, Melissa said. And they're getting desperate. The next morning, federal marshals escorted Daniel to a hidden location for a final pre-indictment briefing. It was there that he was shown a sealed document, an official list of those under investigation. 7 names. 3 executives. 2 government officials. 1 former Unity board member. And at the bottom of the list, Warren Trask. Daniel's throat went dry. He hadn't spoken that name in years.
The one at the center of it all.
The man who had orchestrated the materials fraud. The one who'd signed off on every lie. And the one who had ordered the meeting in Colorado 10 years ago, the meeting that ended in near death. He's still in the country? Daniel asked. Somewhere in California, Rayner confirmed. He's been laying low. But the moment this becomes public, he'll run. Then don't wait, Daniel said. Arrest him now. Rayner looked at him. Once we confirm the remaining evidence, your testimony, the new witness, we'll act. But we have to be airtight.
Daniel's Jotan said. Make it airtight.
Don't let him disappear like I did. That night, as Emily slept in the next room, Daniel stood outside on the patio. The desert wind was sharp against his face, filled with dust and silence. Jessica came out behind him. You okay? He nodded. I'm tired. But yeah, I'm okay. She leaned against him.
You're close now.
I can feel it. He looked out toward the horizon. It's not just about bringing them down, he said. It's about remembering who I am.
What kind of man you want to be?
Jessica smiled. You already are. They stood together as the sky above them faded from deep blue to black. No headlights. No sirens. No threats.
Just the sound of wind in the grass.
And the knowledge that tomorrow, everything could change. The sun rose over the sandstone ridges of Santa Fe, casting long golden rays across the safe house walls. Inside, the television played quietly, the volume low but the message loud and clear. Breaking, Unity Health Executive Warren Trask arrested in Los Angeles suburb. Jessica's breath caught as the footage rolled, FBI agents escorting a gray-haired man in cuffs through a gated community. No coat. No tie.
Just a startled expression and silence.
Daniel stood beside her, unmoving. His eyes fixed on the screen, absorbing what he had waited 10 years to see. The man who had orchestrated his disappearance was finally being brought to justice. This is it, he said, almost to himself.
This is the beginning of the end.
But he was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. 2 weeks later, Daniel stood at the podium of a small university auditorium in Denver. The room was packed, not with reporters, but with students, future architects and engineers, aspiring whistleblowers who wanted to hear from the man who had stood up to a system designed to silence him. Jessica and Emily sat in the front row. Behind Daniel, a projected image of the Silver Pine blueprint hung on the wall, not the altered version Unity had submitted, but the original one, now fully authenticated. Daniel adjusted the microphone and began. I used to think that being a good architect meant knowing how to build. But the truth is, it's knowing how to stand. Against pressure. Against shortcuts.
Against the easy way out.
He paused, eyes sweeping the room.
Isto d'allonance.
And it nearly cost me my life. But I'm standing here now because I wasn't alone for long. My wife.
My docteur.
A journalist who wouldn't stop digging.
A stranger who pulled me out of a ravine and gave me a second chance.
He held up a small wooden keychain, D+J, still carved into the back. This was the only thing that survived with me. And now it's a reminder that some things, truth, love, memory, can't be erased. The audience was silent. Listening. Believing. This isn't just a story about corruption. It's about restoration. About reclaiming your voice when it's been stolen. About remembering who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. He stepped back, nodding once. The room rose to its feet in applause. Outside, the wind carried the chill of early spring, but the sun was warm. Daniel stood with Emily near a flowering cherry tree on campus. You were great, she said, arms crossed but smiling. Little cheesy but still. He laughed. Cheesy is part of being a dad. It's in the rulebook. She looked at him for a moment.
I'm glad you came back.
His voice softened. So am I. They started walking toward the parking lot where Jessica waited. The wind picked up, scattering pink petals across the path. Life was not back to normal. It never would be. The scars of the past were still there, some invisible, others carved deep into memory. But they weren't open wounds anymore. They were reminders. Later that afternoon, the family returned to their home in Boulder, the one Jessica had maintained all those years. It smelled of dust and lavender.
Familiar and strange.
Daniel moved through each room slowly, touching frames, chairs, surfaces he hadn't seen in a decade. In the study, he found an old sketchbook tucked behind the bookshelf. He opened it and smiled. Rough drawings of clinics, designed not just for efficiency, but for warmth.
Natural light. Healing gardens.
Designs he'd once dreamed of bringing to life before everything fell apart. He turned to a blank page. And started sketching. 1 month later, Daniel and Jessica stood on the steps of a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., their hands clasped together. Behind them, a flurry of cameras and microphones. But this time, they were not the story.
The system was.
A full criminal case had been opened against Unity Health Foundation. A congressional subcommittee had launched a probe into misuse of federal healthcare funds. Trask faced a list of charges so long the prosecutor had needed multiple pages to read them. But Daniel was done testifying. His part, for now, was finished. He had spoken the truth. Now, it was up to the world to listen. That summer, Daniel started teaching part-time at the same university he'd once graduated from. Not full-time, he didn't want the classroom to become a cage, but enough to guide, to inspire. He called the course Ethics in Design. On the first day, he told his students, you'll learn more from your mistakes than from your successes. And the most dangerous thing you'll ever build is a lie.
Don't let it stand.
At night, he worked on new blueprints. Jessica translated part-time for international nonprofits, now working mostly from home. Emily applied to colleges, some for architecture, others for journalism. And every Friday evening, they had dinner together around the same old table, laughter echoing through the house like music returned. On the anniversary of his return, Daniel took Jessica and Emily back to Silver Pine Pass. Not to revisit the pain, but to reclaim the space. The ravine hadn't changed much. Still steep.
Still silent.
Daniel stood at the edge, looking down not with fear, but with clarity. I thought this was where I ended, he said. Jessica slipped her arm through his. But it's where you began again. Emily crouched by a boulder and pulled out a small wooden plaque she'd made at school. Together, they placed it in the earth near the path. It read,
Truce rises. The wind stirred, soft and warm.
They stood in silence for a long time, then turned and walked back toward the trail. Toward the future.